Hey guys, it's Vince. Today in this video, I'm going to be discussing a particular client of mine. His name is Steve. Steve is a great guy, and even though he's gone through mass misfortune with his purchase overseas, he was nice enough to let me share this with you in order to hopefully save most of you some money, or at least make some of you smarter with your money so that you avoid the mishap that just happened to him. I'm going to give you a breakdown real quick of what happened to Steve. Steve is like many of you. He decided that he was going to look for the best deal he could find. He decided to source overseas. He did that. He found a vendor who was communicating with him, on a regular basis, answering the questions that he had. It seemed, like a good choice. He was saving, thousands of dollars. He's looking at purchasing a 6090 chassis, which is pretty much all over the place if you guys are familiar with Chinese chassis. The price came down to about $5,500 in the end shipped for the chassis. He picked up the chassis at port. It was delivered to him, whatever. He decided to look at the chassis, and as he was reviewing the chassis, he started seeing things, and he found my YouTube channel. After he found my YouTube channel, like many of you, he contacted me. We talked on the phone for quite a bit, and now I've spoken to Steve now repetitively for about a month in performing this retrofit. And without a doubt, there's a lot more money invested here. He's up to almost $10,000 between all the parts, the new controller, and now we're just working our way through the mechanics, and every time poor Steve turns a bolt, he finds something new. Guys, first rule of thumb, always, never ever wire money to China unless you know for sure who you're dealing with. I cannot emphasize that enough. Sourcing overseas is a very dangerous thing if you don't understand who you're sending money to. A lot of the Chinese vendors that are on the iffy level will usually only accept TT Transfer and Western Union. If they do not accept PayPal, if they do not accept any type of payment where you're protected as a purchaser, you're screwing yourself. Okay, you have no one to blame but yourself. And realistically, there are mistakes that can be made, but if you guys are not smart with your money, it will come back to burn you. Steve's a great guy, but unfortunately he made a mistake, and that mistake he couldn't fix. He contacted the vendor like most of you do, and of course the vendor said, "We only sell the tables, we don't support it." Yet, when of course he was going to purchase the table, they were more than happy to sit there and BS with him for hours upon hours about the specs and what he requested. I want shielded cable. Yeah, we'll do that. Meanwhile, they never grounded anything in the chassis. It's a mess. Okay, and these pictures are to prove it, because I have so many clients that I speak to now, and when I tell them my horror stories, I never have pictures to justify what I see on a regular basis. Now I do. These are some of the worst pictures I've ever seen as far as what has come from overseas. Once again, this is not to berate China, because I can tell you right now there are a lot of great quality vendors in China if you know how to find them. Unfortunately, what typically happens is people are driven by strictly price. They're not driven by quality, and they're not driven by the point of logic that if I can buy a 4x8 table for $7,000 from China, that this sounds like a great deal. They take a pretty picture. This must be it. Guys, I'm telling you now, okay? If it was as simple as connecting a point A to point B wire run and saying I'm making 100 grand a year, everybody be wealthy in this industry. It's a fact. So think about that. It's not a pretty picture you're buying usually. You're usually buying from a factory you don't know anything about. You're hoping that you do. And if you are content with purchasing overseas, the one thing I do make a recommendation on, because like I said, there are a lot of good Chinese vendors, purchase from a reputable site. A reputable site is one that will accept PayPal, will accept U.S. forms of payment with buyer protection. If you do not do that, once again, you're playing Russian roulette. So use your head, go on eBay if you're going to purchase overseas, and your money is safe. You will get your money back if there's a problem. Most overseas vendors on eBay will work with you, okay? Most of them will. I would say about 92% now of vendors on eBay are Chinese. You're going to pick that up real quick. It's changed a lot in a couple years, but those are your mass production companies that you're seeing, because again, they go right from factory right to sales. No different than most of you can do once you get your business model up and you own the same equipment, except with higher quality standards. This is something that I've discussed with many of you, but I'm reissuing that statement again. Be careful with your money. and make sure you purchase from a company or corporation that is a middleman to China so your money is protected. eBay is one of the best. I know there's a lot of negative things out there about eBay, but I can tell you what right now, as far as actually protecting the purchaser, it's probably one of the highest rated sites you can get. Amazon would be next, I would say. Amazon's excellent as well, but any other sites other than them, be cautious on. Just verify your payment method, and once again, stay away from wire transfers. Okay. Now we're going to cover these pictures with you to show you what we're dealing with. Now this is a minuscule problem. This was one of the first pictures that Steve sent me, and he told me that they use different couplers. Okay, which is not uncommon. Certain machines, you'll mix and match couplers. Right here we have two rigid couplers, which under most, I'd say about every machine I've ever seen, whether it be pro grade or even hobby grade, whatever it may be, rigid couplers are not ones that you usually want to use because you're never going to have perfection when it comes to shaft alignment. So these do not give. Okay, over here he has a Lovejoy coupler, and you can see the size differential between these. So again, it sparked a little bit of concern as we were going through and reviewing the system. After we went from there, he then took a motor off because, again, we had to look. His motors, of course, had no numbers on them. There was no serial number that could be actually seen. And as we look here, this is his actual gantry, and you could see the mold that they use for this. Now, this mold looks like crap. I mean, this is one of the worst castings I've seen. It's pretty rough, guys. It's really rough. And when we look on the other side, I'm going to show you. You can see dirt in here. Now, this was a new machine, okay? You can see all this dirt in here. Definitely a poor sign. I don't care if you're buying a used machine, which is really what this looks like. If you find oil and dirt like this all throughout the machine, you can understand that whoever was running the machine usually didn't perform the routine preventative maintenance that they should have. And again, guys, that just translates into money and loss of longevity in the mainstream of you actually using your equipment. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go on to the next picture. Again, this doesn't look that bad. Right now I showed you couplers. I showed you that. Here's, again, this I believe is his Y-axis. And you can see that lead screw, the way it's cut. Okay? Not a clean cut. Lead screw, again, is very dirty. If you look at the dirt around it, very dirty. Casting here, you can see lots of lines, and it's just not clean. Nothing is clean about this. The taps are clean, apparently. I did talk to Steve, and the taps of the holes for the mounts seem to be good. Again, not so bad. Not great. Certainly not great, but not bad. I've seen much worse from here. Here's a Z-axis. Now's when you're starting to realize some things are really, really not so great. I'm zooming in here. You can see that lead screw is not centered in the actual centering hole that was machined in. Okay? That means that's going to translate to the shaft of the motor. And one way or another, you're trying to get that out. So again, a flexible coupler is a must. If you notice, that's why they use the Lovejoy coupler. But this, from this picture, and again, this is a bad actual angle, but you can definitely see that lead screw is not square in that hole. Okay? So that's another issue we had to correct. Steve had to purchase new couplers. The couplers were not cheap because they were not routine in size. So we had to get those made and get that all done. You can see the centering hole, once again, is embedded in the actual chassis. That's fine. But when you see a lead screw not centered in the bore of that hole, guys, again, that's giving you a red flag, a huge red flag. Hopefully you'd see that before you purchase it. Of course, the Chinese vendor that he was purchasing this from never showed him any of this, and they never usually do. Close this one out. Okay, here's our motors. Now, what you're going to find here, and this is the only reason I put this picture in, motors really aren't that bad. You got two different size motors for his X and Y, and then his Z had a different size motor. Not so uncommon, I get it. What is uncommon is that the actual numbers that these motors had didn't actually measure up to any torque standard, which I found a little odd. After searching, we found that they were 4-amp motors. No one carried them, and that is extremely rare that I could not find them anywhere. It was just a really odd thing. You could see here, it looks like our green wire is broken. Just showing you the motors to give you an idea. And again, we're going to keep going because the pictures keep keep expressing more and more problems as we go. Once again, this is another picture of the y-axis. Nothing really much different. You can still see that nasty cut from the actual where they cut the lead screw. Okay, another picture of the gantry. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. Okay, now this is his gantry, and I want you guys to pay real close attention. This is a new machine now, or it's supposed to be. Look at this debris and dirt in the back here. Okay, it's supposed to have never been used, never been cut. I don't know if they tested it. I'm assuming they did. But that is unacceptable, guys. If you're purchasing a machine and you notice this kind of filth inside the machine, then you already know something is not right, especially when it's supposed to be new. Okay? So be very wary of that. Secondly, you can see here he's measuring the distance from the tip of the motor shaft, his new motor shafts, to the actual lead screw base. And you can see here he's at about a 2-inch margin. Well, we know that by the time he gets a coupler for this, he's at about 3 inches before he has proper engagement on the motor shaft. Guys, that lead screw was cut way too short. Way too short. And the frightening part is, if this happens to you, and in Steve's case, I actually had to use a motor coupler that is used for marine engines to get the actual spacing, because this is ridiculous. This shows you poor quality all the way around. I mean, first of all, the dirt and debris is the big red flag. But when you see something like this, unless you're planning on replacing the lead screw, which of course he's already got so much money invested, we just want to get her trued up. We already know that the actual alignment is not bad there. He can true it up a little more. But looking at this gap is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so when I get asked, you know, what kind of problems do you see when I tell people lead screws cut about 1.5 inches too short, look at this. Absolutely ridiculous. I showed this to one of my other engineering buddies, and James told me, he said to me he definitely got a lemon. He's never seen it either. I mean, it just tells you what you've got to be careful of. That is absolutely frightening. And thank God I was able to find a motor coupler that we could use, because if not, this would have had to have been replaced. There was no other way to do it unless we bore out the chassis to actually bring in that motor closer. Okay? Very important stuff here as we look at this. You can also see here the actual rails. They don't look to be that clean cut. I know that's kind of picky, but when you're buying something new and you're paying, you know, in excess of $5,000, you would hope that they'd at least cut them square. And that's just my own opinion. Okay? I'm going to keep moving on now. Again, that gives you a great idea of the distance that this shaft is off. Look at that. That is absolutely ridiculous. All the debris. And again, you can really see just how filthy it is in there. Here is his y-axis. Now this is interesting too. Look at this. The other shaft was way off. This is right on top of it. Okay, so we know we have to use spacers here because no coupler is going to be that close, of course. Again, you can see the casting here is just horrible. Just does not look nice and sound. Nothing was actually levelized. It's just horrible. You know, when I see this kind of stuff, this kind of workmanship, and again, I'm not going to berate China because, like I said, it's not the area, it's not the location of manufacturing. It's the fact of who you're purchasing from. You just don't know. It's like I said on the forums, you guys, when you're getting information on forums, you don't know who you're getting it from. You're hoping you're getting it from a reliable source. But in essence, you're playing with fire. When you purchase overseas and you don't know how to purchase, you're doing the same thing. This can easily be corrected by just increasing spacing on the motor by using standoffs, which he will incorporate to elevate the motor so that we have proper coupler engagement. Okay, here's our Z-axis. And again, you can see the casting. Let's zoom in real quick. You can see the casting here real rough. And look at the shaft misalignment. We're definitely off there. You can see that I did point out in the hole it wasn't centered, and now you can see the lead screw. That's about the normal lead screw dimensions as far as engagement to the actual motor shaft. That's a lot better than the rest. And again, you can just see lots of debris over here. We have a lot of rub marks. It's just not clean, guys. It's not clean. And when I see stuff like this, again, you have to then use proper couplers that do align, or do allow, I should say, for misalignment, because we want to make sure we have as smooth of engagement as possible with any type of transmission. Okay, no different than your car, no different than a table. You want it to be smooth. This is just poor quality. But on a good note, they used a bellow to actually protect it from any debris, which is interesting. Sometimes I get a kick out of what I see. You guys probably do as well. Now what we're going to look at. This is probably the worst thing I've ever seen, and of course I saved the best for last, because when he first told me, I thought he was lying to me. Underneath the table, to get proper spacing, now you can see all this grease here too. These little jagged buddies, most of you out there probably know what they are, but if you don't, Steve was nice enough to let me know, because I didn't believe him, I'm being honest, till I seen it. These are hacksaw blades that they use to shim the base of the axis so that it would come into alignment, guys. Look at how rough the casting is. But when I seen the jaggedness on these blades, I could not believe what I was seeing. They actually painted the blades to match the base to hopefully hide them. Okay, as we close this out, go to another angle. There you go. There's the teeth of the hacksaw. I don't think I have to warn you guys much more. When you see stuff like that, it's just horrific. Okay, that is just absolutely horrific that they're able to sell and offer that, and then you guys are supposed to do something with that. And unfortunately, like I said, to sum this whole little picture album up, Steve ended up paying $5,500 for a table that was a 6090 chassis shipped from China from an unknown vendor he never dealt with. And then he paid about another, I believe he's up almost $5,000 total between accessories and between all of a controller retrofit. Now, just to give you an idea, guys, this is just the mechanics of the machine. I always talk about the controller because, again, that's my engineering that I deal with every day. The chassis is just as important, especially when you've seen these pictures. I mean, it's like I said, it's like one red flag after another. But overall, keep in mind that all of it goes together. And I tell that to everybody, you know, when he first talked to me and we discussed his controller, there were some red flags that he picked up immediately. He asked him to use shielded cable. Oh, yeah, we're going to use shielded cable. He gets it in. There's no leads run to any of the shields. So I immediately told him they might have used shielded cable, but it's all but useless if you don't have those drains tied into a ground. He picked up on that immediately. He was watching my videos, and that's what gave him the heads up. That's what gives a lot of you guys the heads up. Grounding the chassis has to be done in order for it to be stable. One of the bigger things with his enclosure that the actual was housing the controller was the fact that they just took it upon themselves to mount the VFD in there, which the Chinese do a lot. A lot of vendors are doing that because it's easier to ship. Okay, it makes it all inclusive, and they can mount it in and make it look really nice, and it usually does look really nice. But let me clue you in on something. If you use a metal enclosure, and we talk about EMI all the time in my previous videos, I discuss it a lot, you're trapping and condensing all of that EMI inside that enclosure right around your drives. Guys, you do not want to do that even if you are using shielded cable, because once again, you will never totally eliminate EMI. What you're trying to do is reduce it to where you have a functional, stable machine. Okay? That is the absolute worst thing you can do, is mount a VFD inside the enclosure with your drives. You want every subsystem isolated. Anything that's pulling that amount of amps should be isolated on a wall between 6 to 10 feet away from the base of the chassis, because when that unit fires, as soon as you pull those amps from a 220 or a 110, if you're into one of those real high-end breakers, you're looking at a plume of EMI that is condensed around your chassis. And there's no use in trying to defend against it if you have it actually on top of your drives, because essentially you're going to get penetration. And he picked up on that right away. We started talking about it. He showed me pictures. And I'll be honest with you, he didn't even really, I think he turned it on once and turned it off and just got rid of everything. So paid for a controller, got rid of the controller, paid for a chassis, and you've seen what he has to correct with this. It's a nightmare. So guys, take it from Steve, take it from me. Again, I appreciate Steve. He's a great guy, and I'm glad to be working with him. I'm glad to get his table up and running. But I'm telling you guys, be careful. You know, take your time. Don't do anything foolish. You know, look online, ask questions. Take the time out. If you're serious about getting involved in CNC, I'm there to help. I have no problem scheduling phone calls. You guys, you've been really great about working around my schedule. I try my best to work around yours as well. I'm getting very, very busy now, especially as the website's about to go live. And again, the website is going to highlight things like this. It's going to be learning experiences for everybody. And that's what we're looking to do. We want to educate. And again, through the educational process, you guys are going to save money. This is without a doubt one of the most cost-effective videos I've made, showing and highlighting what you can expect if you take a chance and you get screwed, because this poor guy was screwed. I mean, really bad. And now that's why I'm saying, you guys, you're at a point now. It's a great time of year. Everybody's getting their tax return back. It's a great time to start a business, come up with different ideas. It's wonderful. And do it right. If you can't afford what you're looking for, wait, but do it right. Ask the right questions. Think. Watch my videos. Watch them again if you have to. I mean, there's a lot of great information out there. I'm not the only one, but one thing I'll say is that if you guys take the time and do the research, then in essence, you really have nothing to fear. But if you just jump in, and again, it's really inviting. Some of these vendors, they put out ads that look really, really enticing. It looks so genuine. Everything looks good. The pictures look great. And then you get the table and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what did I do? I mean, you don't want to do that. You definitely do, especially if you're trying to start a business. Thank God, Steve didn't have a business going already. He's trying to get to that level. If, God forbid, it was somebody that had a business and purchased one of these machines, it could be catastrophic. I mean, it's pretty much catastrophic for him, but think about if you were relying on it to make money immediately. I mean, you don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy. So, again, I hope this video has helped. If you guys have any questions, contact me. Again, you can contact me direct through my email is storm2313@gmail.com. You can also contact me through my eBay store. It's eDealers Direct Automation. Is shortened it down to eDealers Direct. Message me if you have system questions where you want to discuss a system, a retrofit. Guys, don't message me a huge email. Save your time. My time is valuable too. Let's schedule a time to talk. We can do that. We can discuss your system. 9 out of 10 times that's the fastest way, unless you know specifics of what you want to get involved with and what components you want to order. But everybody's system is different. There is nothing that's cookie cutter in this industry. You can see that just by looking at this table. Don't buy a Franken table. Let's do it right. Contact me and we'll get you guys squared away at least. And not everybody purchases, guys. I can't tell you how many people I turn away, and I'll tell them, look, don't do that. If you have the right equipment, sometimes you don't have to buy other equipment. But by the same token, be realistic in what your endeavor is. If you're trying to start a business, if you're trying to do, expand a business, be realistic of what it's going to take to do that. And when you are realistic, it'll all come to fruition, I promise. So again, if you guys need anything, let me know. Thank you all. I thank you all for your support. My subscriber database is going through the roof, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And again, if you need anything, just message me.